Remember that debate during the pandemic? On the left, they were saying, Trump and Joe Rogan took it. It must be for animals. Okay, it won the Nobel Prize in 2015 for what it did for humans. But whatever, the point is, it's a drug. It's not a politician. Drugs don't have political parties. Although I do suspect Xanax is a Democrat. What good is liberalism if you don't win elections? Last week, Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton said, I have 2 little girls. I don't want them getting run over on a playing field by a formerly male athlete. But as a Democrat, I'm supposed to be afraid to say that. Yes, there's the problem in a nutshell. Because Congressman Moulton sounds reasonable to me, but his campaign manager immediately resigned in protest. Let me make this as plain as I can to the smart people. The campaign manager who resigned, yeah, let that person go.
Bill Maher isn't just criticizing Democrats anymore. He's dismantling them piece by piece, week after week. Once hailed as a liberal icon, Maher has become the party's worst-case scenario. A former insider now standing on stage, torching everything they thought was untouchable. And it's not subtle. On his latest episode of Real Time, Maher didn't just throw shade, he delivered a full-on roast. With surgical precision, he carved through the Democratic establishment, leaving no room for excuses or spin. His message? The left has lost the plot, and he's done pretending otherwise. This isn't about party loyalty anymore. This is about calling out a movement that's become unrecognizable, even to its own members. Maher opened the floodgates by calling the Democratic Party a flock of spineless chickens, clucking around aimlessly with no real convictions. Not exactly the kind of line that wins you backpats at fundraising dinners. His argument was simple. Democrats don't stand on principles. They stand on party lines. Change the speaker, and you change the policy, no matter what the facts say. Take electric vehicles.
Well, Americans must get over the fantasy they have that they are a people of core convictions and deeply held beliefs. They're not. They only care which side is saying something. Let me give you 10 million examples. This car used to be fire. Now it's on fire. Back when Elon Musk was presumed liberal, liberals loved electric cars and conservatives hated them. Then Elon went MAGA, and while the car market grew by 10% last month, sales of electric vehicles were down 5%, and not just Teslas, all EVs.
Maher pointed out how liberals once treated EVs like sacred tech. Tesla wasn't just a car brand, it was a symbol of the future, a badge of environmental honor. That is, until Elon Musk dared to question the liberal narrative. Suddenly, Tesla became radioactive. The very people who once praised Musk as a climate hero turned on him overnight. Same cars, same emissions, but a different political stance from the CEO. And suddenly, that's all that mattered. Maher didn't mince words. He called it out for what it is, tribal thinking disguised as progress. And as we're about to see, it's not just about cars or CEOs. This pattern is infecting policies that impact actual lives, especially when it comes to kids. If there was any doubt that partisanship had replaced reason, Maher crushed it with this next example.
It's a crazy, shallow way to make decisions that we all do too much. A new book by David Zweig called An Abundance of Caution about the repercussions from keeping the schools closed so long during the pandemic has garnered a lot of attention. And here's the author's takeaway line. The American Academy of Pediatrics were very strongly in favor of getting kids into schools, but as soon as Trump came out in favor of reopening, they completely reversed their position. Hey, if you find yourself suddenly hating something you loved 5 minutes ago, or vice versa, ask your doctor if ivermectin is right for you.
One that should outrage every parent in America. He referenced a book by David Zweig, revealing how the American Academy of Pediatrics initially supported reopening schools during the pandemic. But the second Donald Trump echoed that same position, they flipped, completely reversed their stance. Not because of new data, not because of medical breakthroughs, because Trump said it. That's not a response grounded in science. It's politics in a lab coat. And the cost? Children's education, mental health, and long-term well-being. Maher labeled it for what it is, Trump Derangement Syndrome, so powerful, so irrational, that it hijacked critical public policy. The target wasn't Trump. It was the American people who got caught in the ideological crossfire. The absurdity didn't stop there. Maher then revived a moment many had forgotten: the media circus over Joe Rogan's use of ivermectin. News outlets slammed Rogan for supposedly taking horse dewormer, a narrative that spread like wildfire. What they left out? Ivermectin has a well-documented medical use in humans, and even won a Nobel Prize in 2015. But that detail didn't fit the script. Why was Rogan targeted so viciously? Maher has a theory. It wasn't the drug. It was who took it. Rogan wasn't obedient enough. He questioned the mainstream narrative. That made him dangerous, not to public health, but to political control.
So don't be a hypocrite. And that's the challenge, to not automatically rush to the opposite viewpoint based solely on who said it. But until we get to where we can do that, I just hope the Democrats come out strongly next week for dictatorship, coal mining, and making pot illegal.
Maher jokingly compared Democrats to Xanax: calm, numbing, and ultimately ineffective. Their messaging, he says, doesn't solve problems. It just dulls public frustration and keeps voters sedated while real issues go ignored. And it's working, just not in the way they'd hoped, because now people are waking up and walking away. According to Maher, the exodus isn't about ideology, it's about sanity. Moderate Democrats, centrists, independents, even liberals are quietly backing away, not because they've become conservatives, but because they're tired of performative outrage and ideological purity tests. They didn't leave the Democratic Party out of hate. They left out of exhaustion. Maher points to the culture war over pronouns, censorship, and identity obsession. For many voters, it wasn't the policies that drove them away. It was the constant noise, the lecturing, the moral superiority, the refusal to accept common sense as anything other than a threat. And what happened to people who dared to push back? That's where the story gets even darker. Take Representative Seth Moulton, a Democrat from Massachusetts.
What good is liberalism if you don't win elections? Last week, Massachusetts Congressman Seth Moulton said, "I have 2 little girls. I don't want them getting run over on a playing field by a formerly male athlete. But as a Democrat, I'm supposed to be afraid to say that." Yes, there's the problem in a nutshell. Because Congressman Moulton sounds reasonable to me, but his campaign manager immediately resigned in protest. Let me make this as plain as I can to the smart people. The campaign manager who resigned, yeah, let that person go.
He voiced what many consider a totally reasonable concern. He didn't want his young daughters competing in sports against transgender athletes who were born male. That's it. That was the comment. And yet, his campaign manager resigned in protest. Maher's reaction: let that person go. Because according to Maher, when you punish people for expressing valid opinions, even ones rooted in fairness, you're no longer debating, you're dictating. This isn't leadership, it's ideological bullying. The modern left, Maher says, doesn't lose elections because of the right. They lose because of themselves, because they silence their own voices, alienate moderates, and treat honest questions like betrayal. And if you think that's bad, wait until you see what they're doing to history. Maher's next target? The cultural war on America's past. He tore into what he called a dangerous trend, rewriting history to suit modern narratives. It's not about learning from the past anymore. It's about weaponizing it. Case in point, even Abraham Lincoln isn't safe. Activists and scholars are now reevaluating historic figures using 21st century standards, a concept Maher calls presentism. That means judging people from centuries ago as if they had today's knowledge, values, and worldview. It's not progress, he says. It's arrogance, and it's distorting the way we teach, understand, and grow from our history. Maher names names: Jefferson, Gandhi, Churchill, leaders who changed the world and shaped human history. Were they flawed? Of course. But their contributions are undeniable. Trying to erase their legacies because of their personal failings isn't enlightenment. It's ignorance. He compares it to being mad at your 10-year-old self for not knowing what you know now. It's a pointless, backward way to view the world, and it robs us of the complexity that defines real growth. According to Maher, This obsession with canceling the past mirrors the left's biggest modern sin, valuing moral grandstanding over meaningful progress. And that brings us to his final and most devastating blow. Maher isn't yelling from the outside. He's speaking as a lifelong Democrat, someone who donated money, campaigned for candidates, and believed in the mission. But now, he feels betrayed. The values he supported, free speech, rational debate, environmental responsibility, have been drowned out by identity politics, censorship, and performative outrage. He didn't leave the left left him. And in doing so, they lost everything. The House, the Senate, the White House, the Supreme Court. Not because of Trump's brilliance, but because of their own blindness. Maher's final plea isn't to abandon liberalism. It's to rescue it from itself, to restore sanity before it's too late. Because if not, the next loss won't just be political, it'll be existential. Bill Maher may be saying what others are afraid to admit. If you're tired of echo chambers, moral posturing, and tribal outrage, then hit that like button and subscribe. Because this isn't just politics anymore. It's a reckoning. And trust me, we're just getting started.